Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today on Brady's Corner. I'm Brady. This is my corner. We've got a very special guest today, Mark Zweig. And I normally would have said of Zweig Group for the second time, but no longer because you've currently no longer, you said you sold interest in that about 4 years ago?
Yeah, that's started it in '88, sold it to a private equity firm in 2004, taken over by its lender in 2009, recruited me back in 2010, and then we sold it, our interest in it in 2018, late fall of 2018. So
Perfect.
had been, yeah, spending a lot of time on my porch since then, Brady.
Well, I see you're also involved in a lot of things in Northwest Arkansas, which, by the way, we've seen signs in Austin that says, "Hey, I don't remember exactly what the advertisements say, but it says, do you wish you would have been in Austin 10 years ago? Move to Northwest Arkansas." And that's what
Yeah,
they're saying. Austin. Northwest Arkansas, Fayetteville, Bentonville is the Austin of 10 years ago.
that's what they say. I'm hoping we don't turn into the Austin of traffic problems.
That's true.
But Austin is a great city. No, we're a super high growth area, less than 2% unemployment, growing very rapidly. Supposedly will double in size in the next 10 years. Absolute boom economy here and so much to do. Best American art museum there is with crystal bridges. And now we're trying to be known as the bicycling center of the world. The veil of bicycling is the thrust of Northwest Arkansas currently.
Well,
But
and you're still a professor at University of
yeah,
Arkansas.
that's right. Yes, I teach entrepreneurship. Been there for 18 years now, and it's been one of the best jobs I've ever had, including my own business. I really do enjoy teaching entrepreneurship to my students. And, this is sort of a corporate area here. I mean, Bentonville, Walmart drives the economy. And, I think they gave us one of, if not the largest donation ever given to a business school at one point. The Walton Foundation, and while it was a tremendous benefit to us, I'm sure they had some self-interest there in terms of trying to create workers for Walmart and all the companies that serve Walmart. So my thrust has always been give people an alternative to selling their soul to the corporate devil.
Let's talk about that for a little bit. So, how many of your students do you think go off and start become entrepreneurs?
That's a good question. I don't have, I used to keep a list, but it's just too long now. There are hundreds.
Okay.
If you look at all the students I've had over the years, one of my students was a guy named Mo Elliott. He started a company called Fayette Chill while he was in school here and just sold that to an investment group in Boston and did really well. He's living in Santa Fe
Oh, wow.
now. But yeah, it's really gratifying when you see that. My neighbor in the last house we lived in, who was probably the best neighbor I've ever had, was a former student. He owns his own business, and his wife is a physician. I think she's an endocrinologist, but and she's the daughter of another friend of mine. But and then one of my sons-in-laws, um, married to my 31-year-old daughter, he worked for a business that was started by one of my former students as well. So it all kind of comes together, and it's great. The guy that lived next door to me, I gave him a B in the class when he got an 89.5, and he never forgave me for that. But it didn't affect his success in the business world, evidently.
That's great. That's great.
So
So,
yeah,
what is it that, and I don't want to, put all K through 12 schools in this category and colleges for that matter, but what is it do you think that they are teaching that really doesn't comport to, the real world? And by that I mean, they, at least in my experience, they teach, learn your writing and writing and arithmetic, and you learn to
Right,
be
the three R's.
yeah, the 3 R's, and reading, writing, arithmetic, and um, memorize this, and learn to be good at regurgitating what you memorized. Um,
Well, you went to
but
law school, that's what that's all about, right?
yeah, yeah.
It's, you got to be good at that.
Yeah, but one of the things about law school is, you have to be able to look at a fact pattern, and then, apply the law to facts and circumstances, and then be able to flip that, be a
Sure.
proponent of one way, and defense attorney another way. So prosecutor versus defense, or and plaintiff's attorney versus defense attorney, things like that. And so, the critical thinking skills are required, really,
Yes.
or at least highly suggested. There. So,
Yeah, it's hard for me to say. I mean, if you look at, well, one thing you got going for you is most students at state universities, and we are really highly ranked. I think we were the 26th ranked public college of business, maybe 25th this year. We're number one in the nation in supply chain, public or private, which is pretty cool. But the parents who send students to state universities want their kids to get good jobs, and they think if they're going to do their own thing, it's like, why did you waste your education on that?
right.
So, that's kind of crazy. We certainly have moved away from information regurgitation, at least in our college, which I think is a really well-run college of business. And we try to give our students lots of experience, lots of interaction with real business people, lots of real problems to actually solve. And my students, I don't give any tests. Only have them write papers and do projects. No multiple choice quizzes or anything like that. So
Mhm.
it's we're trying to teach them how to think, and I think we're having some success. I'd say the biggest deficiency I find with students in general is a lack of accounting and finance knowledge.
Mhm.
It's a real Achilles heel when you consider that that's the language of business. And I know that's something you understand with the stuff that you do related to these R&D tax credits and all. It's just, you've got to understand the numbers and how they relate and what they mean. And even though, I'm sure many of them got good grades in accounting, they can't really, explain what an income statement is versus a balance sheet versus a cash flow projection.
Let's stay on that topic, and now convert the, transition, evolve the topic over to architecture, engineering, construction.
Oh
One of
yeah.
mine and yours favorite subjects here. As you know, that's a focus of Brains, is the AEC and the built environment.
Yes.
And especially, I would say all three, but especially in the architectural engineering world, it's interesting to find so many of these folks. Would you say that the financial and accounting and the business of it is one of the most estimated or undervalued things in
Oh,
the
absolutely. I mean, you can do really well in that business, as you know. But yeah, it's a huge deficiency. That's why I'm a big proponent of open book management and sharing the numbers with all your employees and really explaining how they relate. But yeah, I mean, our industry, we're behind on almost everything. You know that. I mean, they figure it out somewhere else, and then 10 years later, we get it. Um, it's so fragmented, and the information seems to move slowly
Mhm.
through the system. When you've got 100,000 small companies that make up the industry, just on the AE side,
Mhm.
um, it's a huge deficiency. I mean, most owners don't even understand the difference in cash and accrual accounting, and the various revenue recognition methods one could use and how they totally change the look of your financials. They're still out there beating on utilization, so
Right.
they get people who are billable and just overrun budgets. They don't really understand. I mean, like, I never care about that. All I look at is the net service revenue related to the total labor. That tells me everything. That's where it all comes together,
Amen.
you know?
Amen. Or per person revenue
Yeah.
is yeah, that's, and
It-
then you know what they say is like what was it, the managing partner was saying well our utilization is up, and the controller said but it's a cruel world, right?
ha ha. That's a dad joke. I mean, even though the kids may not understand it.
I'll be here all week.
No, it's true. I mean, it seems like we repeat the mistakes, over and over. I mean, right now, I just wrote my last Zweig letter article, which I still write every week, and God knows I've done like 1,500 or more of those things. And on tuning up your profitability, because I think we're getting fat, we're getting sloppy now again, piling on the overhead people and, just doing all the things that get you in trouble when times go the other way. Although I'm not sure it's going to for a while. It's, this economy is just roaring right now.
It is, and we'll keep our fingers crossed on that. On the same subject is finance, related to AEC.
Mhm.
Why do you think there's such a reluctance for architecture, engineering, and construction firms to avail themselves of these tax credits? And for example, R&D 179D and the like, and when you can go and look at, let's look at the public companies like AECom. In fact,
Right.
there was an article written that I think was intended to be kind of like a little bit of a hit piece, against AECom, but I thought when I read the article, it was saying that, well, AECom has very minimal or no federal income tax, but you and I both know that a company that big is paying millions upon millions, maybe hundreds of millions in other federal and state taxes,
Sure, payroll related
just
taxes. I mean,
payroll.
yeah, these companies don't make a quote profit on their tax return because they bonus out a lot of their money, as we know, runs through the payroll system, completely legit,
Mhm.
to
And
do it like that.
well,
But
one of the things, it talked about their, all the millions of dollars they were taking on tax credits. I'm like, wow, I want to meet their
right,
CFO and shake their hand. They did a great job.
right. No, I mean, I'm no expert in these tax credits, but I was on the board of a company based in Southern California about 10 or 12 years ago when this stuff started really becoming something that smart firms did, and it saved us millions of dollars. I can tell you that. And it was legit. I mean, we were doing a lot of R&D related stuff that,
Mhm.
was good to be able to recapture some of that,
Right.
some of our methodologies that we put to use to do things faster and better.
What would
So
you say though to the managing partner or the CFO of an AEC firm that is just like, well, do we really deserve it? We're being paid otherwise, and a lot of this, even though we're not funded, technically. What would you say to that person?
I mean, I can't say I've ever had that specific conversation, although it's not hard to imagine. I guess I would say is it's completely legit. You're not, tax avoidance is smart, tax evasion is illegal. So,
That's right.
you should take advantage of it. And if you want to take the money that you save and put it somewhere else that you think is valuable, then be my guest. I mean, it's really it seems kind of silly that you wouldn't. I mean, that's like saying I'm a real estate investor, but I don't believe in depreciation because really my property went up in value. I mean,
Right.
that'd be pretty crazy because the depreciation is one of the best aspects of real estate ownership, as anybody knows who's had it.
Okay, so we're in very exciting times right now between architecture and engineering in particular. We're seeing this is M&A bonanza.
Oh, no kidding.
Where do you see this going over this year and next year?
Man, nobody really knows, but with the demand exceeding supply to the extent that it is, and all of the sort of pent up needs that are out there in the marketplace, they say we've got 4 million too few houses. We need better infrastructure everywhere you go. It's aging, it's deteriorated. We're trying to grow. I mean, it just doesn't seem like the demand side is going to wane at all. So I see nothing but green pastures ahead. I guess the only thing that could really change things would be we get in World War III or interest rates go to 12% overnight or something like that. It's hard to predict the effect
Yeah.
of those kinds of events, but understaffed, overworked, too much demand. I mean, I just don't see any end in sight. The real needs are there. So
Yeah.
we're going to keep doing well. And the investor community has discovered this industry. They figured out that, hey, if you look at the return on equity in these companies, it's pretty darn good. 50, 60, 70% in some cases or more on an annual basis. That's a pretty good, and they're not, historically, they've been undervalued compared to things like public accounting firms or IT consulting firms. So, to a certain extent, we've been discovered by the investor community. You mentioned AECOM early on. Is certainly one of the early leaders in this buy move. But it's a great industry, and it's got a lot of legs in it. I think I don't see it slowing down.
So in the past, one of the observations that I would make is in the past, you didn't see a lot of mixing of architecture and engineering in the same firm, and now you're starting to see that acquisition and the
Yeah.
merging of architecture firms with engineering firms. Do you think that's going to be somewhat of a trend
I,
going forward?
I think that's been a trend, and I think the more sort of maybe more critical is the trend to get into at-risk construction for these companies. So that's where the real money flows through the contracting business, as you know. And so I think that's a bigger change. The architects getting into engineering, the problem with that is it's always been that good engineers don't like working for architects. Okay. I mean, they just don't. They feel like the architects are too ego driven, and they hog all the limelight. They can't go get engineering only projects. There are some issues associated with that. Structural engineers may be the exception. They don't mind. They like to team up with an architect and
Sure.
stay together over the long haul. But the engineers getting into the architecture business, now that's an interesting move. And one of the companies I was an owner in 35 years ago, we tried that, and then we divested the architects because there was just too much cultural incompatibility. But I do think that this whole integration of design and construction, I've resisted using AEC as a moniker because I don't like it. I think the architecture and engineering business is completely different from contracting.
Oh yeah.
Having been an owner in both, companies, both types of businesses. I mean, the morality, the sense of ethics, the business orientation, they're just completely different in those two worlds. Kinds of people that you deal with. It's just a different world, but that is the way the marketplace seems to be moving, is more integration of design and construction for a lot of reasons.
Thank you so much, Mark, for joining and giving us the time today. Before we jump off, do you have any words of wisdom for somebody that might be looking to launch their own architecture or engineering or construction firm?
Well, now's a great time. I think my best words of wisdom, Brady, would be to either have as a mentor or set up a formal board of advisors at a minimum made up of people who have already been successful in the business. I think if people would do that, they're going to be a lot more successful and be able to gain ground a lot faster. You look at Kit Miyamoto out there at Miyamoto International is a great example. I joined his board when he had about 8 or 9 employees, and we already had a board with Peter Yanev, who was the founder of EQE on it. And I brought in Ed Friedrichs, who was the CEO of Gensler. And, we had some pretty smart people in there. Gosh, I mean, Kit's been unbelievably successful. He'll tell you, Yanev in particular, gave him the blueprint on how to take a company that was doing tilt wall buildings and industrial parks and turn it into one of the leading earthquake and seismic design firms in the world.
Wow.
And having Yanev right there. And the only way he got Yanev, he asked him, met him one time, asked him, and the guy said, sure, I'll do it. So that's my best advice.
That is very sage advice, and I think everybody would be wise to take that advice. So, I know I depend on advisors all the time, so I would 100% agree with you. And Mark, thank you so much again for giving us the time. I hope you'll join us again.
Yeah, it'd be fun.
And really appreciate this. I know our audience is going to love this. And thank you everyone for joining us here on Brady's Corner. Make sure to like and subscribe. And we'll talk to you next time.